Time passed and Timothy begged, "Daddy, I don't want to go to Aunt Sveta's today. I'm old enough to stay home alone." Vadim put a knitted hat with ears on his son's head and replied, "You may think you're big, but you're not. Dad, you measured me the other day and said I've grown." Objected Timothy. Objected Timothy. Objected Timothy. After the hat, his father helped him put on a jacket with a funny bear pattern and a warm scarf. However, the scarf caused Timothy to feel negative emotions. "There's that ugly scarf again. Someday it will strangle me," he complained, trying to free his neck. "Timothy, be firm and stop whining. Without the scarf, you'll catch a cold and end up back in the hospital getting shots every 4 hours. Remember what the doctor said. You need to dress warmly," reminded Vadim firmly. The boy instinctively rubbed his soft spot. His father's words were working in the right direction, although he was still indignant. His discontent was evidenced by puffed cheeks and streams of steam from his mouth. But Vadim did not pay attention to the signs of discontent of his son, because the child was only 6 years old. The young father was pleased that he quickly and easily overcame his son's resistance. Next, everything went according to plan. Vadim took his son in his arms and closed the apartment door. It took less than a minute to secure Timothy in the child's seat. Timothy's mood instantly improved, and he excitedly exclaimed, "Daddy, I feel like an astronaut." Something like that. Vadim grinned. The special device fired Timothy's imagination, and he envisioned himself as an astronaut or descending into the depths of the sea in his chair. From the sound of it, he activated the latter option this time. Vadim turned around to make sure his little passenger was okay, and then called his sister's number, preparing for their short journey. "Sveta, we're on our way, and we'll be there in 5 minutes. I have a big favour to ask of you. Can you meet us at the entrance? I have very little time." Although Sveta expressed her willingness to go downstairs, there was a sense of dissatisfaction in her voice. However, Vadim could not dictate terms to the family. He was grateful for any help they could provide. The evening city was buzzing with activity unusual for this time of day. Instead of the promised 5 minutes, Vadim spent twice as long on the road. His sister, dressed in a robe and slippers with a fur pom-pom, was waiting on the porch. As soon as he pulled up, she began to rebuke him. "Vadik, I'm freezing. You said 5 minutes." In order not to get into an endless argument, Vadim decided to use a win-win technique. He got out of the car and kissed his sister. "Svetik, forgive me. I didn't take into account that there are hundreds of other drivers in our city, and they all have places to go. Take Timothy. I'll pick him up in a couple hours." Svetlana was touched by her brother's attention. "And why don't you let him stay the night with us? It'll be easier on the baby that way. Tomorrow morning you can pick him up and take him to kindergarten." Vadim hadn't expected such a favour from his sister. "Thank you, Sveta." Lest his sister change her mind, he brought Tinker out into the light and whispered to him, "Obey Aunt Sveta." The boy did not understand his father's request and ran to his aunt. "Aunt Sveta, we will soon go to the sea with Daddy. He'll buy me an aqualung and I'll become a diver." Svetlana muttered something and led her nephew away. Vadim returned to the car with a smirk. "I've handed over the cargo, now let's go." If Vadim had been told a couple of years ago that he would be working as a cab driver in the evenings, earning money illegally, he would have brushed off such a prediction and stayed away from those who suggested it. Similarly, if someone had said that he would soon be a widower, Vadim would have reacted with anger and disbelief. However, as his grandmother used to say, God works in mysterious ways. And Vadim realised the truth of this folk, saying when misfortune came upon him unexpectedly. Although friends and acquaintances considered Vadim and Alina a happy couple, Vadim himself never felt passionate love for his wife. He simply found comfort in their relationship and hoped that it would last a lifetime. They rarely had serious conflicts or dramatic quarrels. Vadim could not even imagine being with another woman and remained faithful to her throughout their 5-year marriage. Friends often teased him during chance encounters. "Vadik, you're such an unusual guy. There are so many women around you, and you act like a eunuch. Don't you want to try something new, like tasting the forbidden fruit?" They joked. Vadim never took offense and always replied, "I am faithful to my only one, and my wife suits me." However, everything changed after the birth of his son Timothy. Vadim turned into a devoted family man, putting the baby at the center of his world. He proudly pushed the stroller ahead of him during walks in the park, and Alina smiled warmly at passers-by. One day she confessed to him, "Vadik, I am overwhelmed with such tremendous happiness that I can't help worrying that it might suddenly disappear." Hearing these words from his wife, Vadim experienced a sense of joy and tried to reassure her, "I'll do my best to make sure it never ends. My father has been reminding me since childhood that each person shapes his own happiness. So, my dear, I will continue to strive for it." Although it was a metaphorical expression, translated into real life, it sounded like a promise to do everything possible for the well-being of their family. Vadim worked incredibly hard and gave his best at work. His efforts were recognized and he was given the opportunity to be promoted. In just 3 years, he and his wife saved enough money to buy an apartment. After another year, they were able to buy a new car. When promising prospects loomed on the horizon, Vadim once said to his wife, "Alina, don't you think it's time for us to think about expanding the family? Right now, it seems too small for us." Alinka joined in and replied, "Do you want to get a dog or maybe a shelter cat?" Vadim replied, "Although I adore pets, I feel more of a connection with people. I want our family to grow." Alina smiled dreamily and rolled her eyes. "I also dream of a daughter. Timothy will protect his sister. He is such a kind boy. The teacher even says that all the girls in his class constantly flatter and admire him." Vadim grinned. "I guess he's like me. I wonder how he'll react to the arrival of his little sister." Tinka was full of joy when he learned that he would soon become a big brother. He was eagerly preparing gifts for his future little sister, toys and colourful books. Anticipation of a new wave of happiness filled the air. However, tragedy struck like thunder. Vadim clearly remembered those minutes that turned his life upside down. It happened on the eve of March 8, during his lunch break. He decided to surprise his beloved wife Alina by buying a luxurious bouquet of roses in a flower store. Having imagined the joy on her face, he received an alarming call. At the other end of the wire shook the voice of Alina, who told about the terrible accident. She fell when she was in a hurry to get buns, and she was in great pain. An ambulance was called, and she asked Vadim to come as soon as possible. Without thinking, Vadim ran out of the office without even bothering to notify his superiors. Despite the fact that his wife worked on the other side of the city, he drove as fast as possible, spending almost an hour on the road. When he arrived at the workplace, his colleagues informed him that the medics had already taken her to the hospital. With anxiety and hope, Vadim reached the medical facility, constantly assuring himself that everything would be fine. He knew that many women fell during pregnancy and everything ended safely. Moreover, in 2 weeks, Alina's maternity leave was to begin. He believed in the incredible achievements of modern medicine. However, when he arrived at the hospital, he did not receive any encouraging news. The staff simply told him to wait. Several hours passed and finally a doctor showed up to talk to him. The doctor was silent for a long time and then gestured helplessly. Vadim's consciousness was trying to comprehend the hardest news of all. His wife was no longer alive. There had been profuse bleeding which, despite initial attempts to stop and stitch, had eventually led to her tragic death. The doctor continued to explain, using technical terms, But Vadim was preoccupied with one question, dictated by parental instinct. He asked, "And the baby? Was the baby saved?" The doctor regretfully replied, "Unfortunately, no. The child has already passed away." In just one day, Vadim had suffered a devastating loss, and he was left with only one source of happiness: his 4-year-old son Tinka. When Tinka asked where his mom was, Vadim hastily replied, "Son, our mom has gone to the sea." Tinka was puzzled and asked why they were not with her. Vadim quickly explained that it was an urgent trip. Tinka, hoping for her return, asked, "Dad, but she will come back, won't she?" Vadim did not want to traumatize his son, so he continued to tell the story for 2 years. However, Tinka rarely remembered his mother's sudden disappearance and eventually forgot about his younger sister. Despite offers from his wife's parents and other family members to take responsibility for Tinka's upbringing, Vadim refused. He firmly believed that he could handle it himself, stating, "Thanks, but I'll do it myself. Fathers are as good as moms." To meet his son's needs, Vadim had to change his job to a less demanding and lower-paying one. Fortunately, thanks to the help of relatives, they were able to live without poverty. One day, Vadim's older sister, Svetlana, mentioned him in passing as a single father, suggesting that perhaps it was time for him to change his status and find a new partner. Vadim rejected this idea, firmly stating, "No one can replace a birth mother." Svetlana took offense at Vadim's answer, but never brought up the subject again. Vadim got used to the life of a single father. However, another tragedy happened. Tinka became seriously ill. At first, he had a runny nose and cough, for which Vadim followed the treatment prescribed by the children's doctor. Everything seemed to be on the mend, until one evening Tinka began to choke. Vadim immediately called an ambulance and his son was hospitalized for a month. The doctors tried different treatment regimens and finally broke the news to Vadim. "Your son has a medical condition with asthmatic symptoms. It requires constant treatment and regular medical supervision." After being discharged from the hospital, the caring father took the child to various doctors, who determined that the cause of the boy's illness was allergies. They gave Timothy various tests and made a list of harmful foods to avoid. Recommendations included daily walks in the fresh air, physiotherapy and vacations at the sea. Timothy was fortunate to be consulted by an important professor who noted that such conditions often improve by the beginning of adolescence. However, compliance with all recommendations is the key to a favourable prognosis. Vadim, the child's father, was stunned by the costs associated with the recommendations, especially the cost of a trip to the sea. Nevertheless, he was ready to make any sacrifices for the sake of his son's health. After considering various options for additional income, Vadim came to the conclusion that working as a cab driver was the most suitable option. However, he soon discovered that in this field of service has its own rules. His first trip turned into a near disaster when he encountered a group of aggressive people on the station square. Vadim challenged them, questioning their ownership of the plaza, but they informed him that the plaza had indeed been purchased and was governed by its own rules. Realizing the potential danger, Vadim decided to leave the plaza to avoid trouble, for he could not risk his son being left without a father. That evening, he contacted an acquaintance deeply connected to the business world, who promised to help him. At the end of the conversation, the acquaintance expressed sadness about Vadim's situation. How did this happen? Nowadays, you can't even get into the taxi business without a protege. Well, come back tomorrow evening. I'll introduce you to the team, said the acquaintance. Vadim arrived at the appointed time, and he was met by the same group of men with shaved heads that had almost attacked him the day before. "Man, why didn't you tell me you were in trouble? We're not freaks. We can help you too," one of the guys said, patting Vadim on the shoulder. "You're a great single dad. I respect you. I-5." Vadim extended his right hand and they cemented their union with a firm handshake. In just 2 months, the single father had accumulated a decent amount of money, and his dream of going on vacation to the sea no longer seemed unattainable. Driving slowly into the square, Vadim greeted a group of fellow drivers. Some men were waiting for passengers, and a few others formed a line a little further away. Vadim asked a familiar driver, "Why are there no customers today? People are just standing around." The man waved him off. "They're all waiting for intercity fares. Who wants to go 100 kilometres away and come back empty-handed?" Vadim was about to bolt for the same spot when he noticed a young woman heading straight for his car. She looked anxious and looked around nervously. Something about her reminded Vadim of Alina. Excitement overwhelmed him, and he got out of the car. "Did something happen to you?" The woman instinctively grabbed his arm. "Yes, perhaps, but I'm not quite sure. We have a country cottage, and our neighbours called to say that someone had broken into the house. I'm very concerned because there have been a lot of thefts in our settlement lately." Vadim tried to calm the woman down. "Maybe you are worried for no reason?" No, not at all. You see, I'm an artist and I'm preparing for my first solo exhibition. All my paintings are in the cottage. I've been working for so many years. What if the house is set on fire and all my work is lost?" Vadim looked into the artist's eyes and he thought he caught a fiery passion in them. "Get in the car. Let's go save your paintings." The woman expressed her delight like a child. And at that moment, something resembling the emotion of his late wife flashed. A sense of unease swept over Vadim, sending shivers down his spine. All the way to the village, the artist talked not only about her art, but also about her love of travelling. She mentioned that she takes her little daughter with her everywhere. Vadim couldn't resist asking a question that begged to be asked. "How does your husband feel about it?" The joy on her face quickly faded. "After my recent separation from my husband, I have to admit that he left me for my friend. But I don't want to be discouraged because I have my daughter. She is my inspiration, and thanks to her, I find solace in creating." As we approached the village, the passenger in the car became excited and exclaimed, "Everything seems to be all right. You see, my house is standing right on the edge. I am actually planning to sell the cottage as it is causing more trouble than good. I'll have an exhibition here soon and plan to advertise it. By the way, do you happen to know anyone who needs a cottage?" Vadim shook his head in response. The passenger paid the fare and jumped out of the car, saying that he would spend the night here. Just when Vadim thought he was coming back empty-handed, an elderly couple approached him. "Nina, is that you? What an unexpected coincidence. We urgently need to go to the city. Driver, could you give us a ride to the train station?" Vadim was glad that he wouldn't have to drive back without passengers. Some time passed. It was the 5th day of their vacation by the Black Sea, and they were enjoying themselves. Timothy especially liked digging in the sand. He quickly made friends with 2 girls who shared his interest. From his recliner, Vadim watched the children as they enthusiastically sculpted bizarre sculptures out of the sand, sticking out their tongues in concentration. Suddenly, one of the girls exclaimed, "Boys, you're doing it all wrong. The castle doesn't look right, it needs a balcony." A question came into Timothy's voice. "How do you know about balconies?" Without embarrassment, the girl replied, "My mom told me. She knows all about castles because she can draw them." Excited, she called out to her mom to join them at the seashore. The woman stepped out of the water, and Vadim's heart raced in anticipation. Before he knew it, his son ran up to him and exclaimed, "Daddy, look, Mom's back. I didn't believe you." His legs were trembling with excitement, but he tried to hide it. Nina recognized him at once. "How small is the world we live in," she exclaimed. "Who would have thought we would meet here on this beautiful beach? And this is your son." She stroked Tinker's head affectionately. Hello, it's nice to meet you. I'm Nina, and this is my daughter, Oksana. Timothy couldn't take his eyes off Nina, and Vadim felt a little awkward. He tried to explain his son's unusual behaviour to Nina. You are very much like my late wife. I always told my son that his mother had gone to the sea. He mistook you for her. Poor little fellow, Nina replied sympathetically. She took Tinker in her arms, and he cried softly, whispering, "Mommy, how good it is to have you back. I've been waiting for you for so long."